Yeah, we're recording now. And I'm going to the waiting room. Okay. And I think as far as housekeeping, that's all we had. In the chat window, if you could put your name and location, that would be appreciated. Okay, now to the program. We're going to start with a tale from ancient Chaldea, where Sophia gives birth to Marduk, who is the precursor to Michael. That's going to be the introduction, and then we're going to follow to the main portion of the program, in which, titled Wisdom Built Herself a House, in which members from various sections of the School of Spiritual Science, I don't know if this is Dorothy or not. Hello? Yes. Dorothy, give me a moment and I'll be right with you, okay? But you can hear the overview of the program. So the main portion of the program is in which members from the various sections of the School of Spiritual Science will stand as wisdom's 7 pillars to share how courage was born from wisdom for them and leading to their work in the world. And so we will have, representing the pedagogical section, Michael Holdridge, the youth section, Stephan Ambrose, medical section, Drs. Wylie and Quentin McMullen, Eurythmy, Barbara Richardson, social science section, Doug Wylie, BioDynamic agriculture, Rand Carter, and for Threefolding, Dorothy Hinkle-Uhlig, who is here on the phone, and I'll try to get her on the meeting in just a moment. After that main section of the program, we're going to go into a 15-minute long breakout session. We're going to put you in a room with 3 or 4 people so that you will get a chance to talk and explore with your karmic group, if you will, the wisdom of the 7 pillars. And then at the end, to close the program, there's going to be a little talk, a little presentation around Michael, the Christus, and Anthroposophy. And we have a special guest tonight. Lucien Dante Lazar is going to be sharing some original songs written especially for our festival and in various points during the program. And now we will begin with the story titled Courage Born of Wisdom, which was written by Archer-Ginsberg. Thank you.
Remember when we were together in the mysteries of old Chaldea? Remember when the universe was once a watery chaos? And then, after, it began to divide into sweet water, known as Apsu, the male principle, and salt water, known as Tiamat, the female principle. At that time, our sleeping and waking life were experienced as moving between these 2 principles. Sleep was not so unconscious, and waking was not so well awake, not very conscious at all.
In our sleep, we worked with shifting images, a weaving, undulating world life, where we were dimly aware of living in harmony with the angelic hierarchies while we slept. Our dreams were not as unconscious or chaotic as they are today. Instead, dreams brought revelations of the spiritual world in whose womb we saw our original home, the source of our own being.
And also in that time, waking life was not as sunny, not as well lit as it is today. The world didn't have fixed boundaries. Things were blurry, and the essence of spirit was felt to be everywhere, but was dimly experienced. Our waking life was continually filled with waking dreams, in which we saw the working of spiritual beings in the surrounding world of nature.
There was a more subtle transition between sleeping and waking, and we distinguished the difference by calling the world of waking by the name of Apsu. And we called what we were when we slept Tiamat, which in ancient Chaldean means the end of the wave. Tiamat was the wave that washed over and submerged our awareness of life in the outside world, making it difficult to clearly distinguish the mineral, plant, and animal kingdoms.
And so it was that in the Chaldean mysteries, we were taught that the human being was closer to the gods when we slept in the Tiamat than when we lived awake among the minerals, plants, and animals. Tiamat, our more ancient primal being, wanted to keep us in that powerful yet unformed world.
Apsu was unknown territory, the place where we bumped against things, an uncomfortable, uncharted land outside of us. And so, most of humanity was content to stay in the Tiamat.
But change was in the air, and staying in that wound-like sleep was not our destiny. So a struggle began, a pushing and a pulling, and this chaotic weaving gave rise to what we might call demons. Horse-like figures with human heads, lion figures with angel heads that originated from the fabric of the Tiamat into the dream life of the human being. And what lived there as demonic forces became hostile to the human being. An unconscious endeavoring to awaken us.
But then a powerful will for good entered the world.
Those who still feel the power of sound vibration can experience the harmony of this E and Ah. Say it with me, unmute. E, Ah. Can you sense this powerful being who with grace helped turn the tide for humanity when the demons from Tiamat became overwhelming? E, Ah, and then later called Sophia, for Ea means the wisdom which rules in all things, and Soph means being. And thus it was that the being of wisdom came into the world, Sophia, the wisdom prevailing in every being.
Sophia gave birth to a son called by the name Marduk, which means bull calf of the sun god. Astrologically, Marduk was also associated with the planet Jupiter, who ruled out of the hierarchy of the archangeloi.
In our time, Marduk, the son of Ea, the child of wisdom, is called Michael, whose name is a question, which means, who is like God?
The doctrine of the mysteries reminds us that Marduk Michael was even then great and powerful. And all those demon beings, the horses with human heads, the lion figures with angel heads, all these weaving, billowing demons standing in their connection as the great Tiamat became the storm winds of change that swept the world, and these were brought under control by Marduk Michael.
The picture presented in the mysteries was that all of these demons together formed a mighty, fire-breathing dragon born out of the night, out of the Tiamat. Marduk Michael fiercely faced this night being, this dragon of fear. First, the archangel son of wisdom thrust at it with all his weapons. When that was of no avail, Marduk Michael then employed the full force of the storm wind, swirling it like a tornado to pierce into the belly of Tiamat, who was burst asunder by the winds of change, spraying out into all space.
And from the body of Tiamat, Marduk Michael formed, with the help of Sophia, the heavens above and the earth below. And so it was that the top and the bottom came into being. And of course, it is up to us in our time now to hold the middle and cultivate the periphery.
But at that time, as was taught in the mysteries, the great son of wisdom of Sophia conquered the dragon and formed the upper heavens from one part of the Tiamat, and the lower, which became the earth, from the other part of the dragon.
Because of this great deed, Marduk Michael became the Babylonian king of the gods, presiding over justice, compassion, healing, regeneration, magic, and fairness. Many refer to him as a storm god and an agricultural deity.
Dear friends, when you look up at the sky into the stars, or when you look down at yourself on the earth, there where the plants grow out of the mineral earth, where the animals form and reform, then you shall see what Marduk Michael has fashioned through wisdom. The field for the healing of our human evolution has been redeemed from the dark abyss of the Tiamat.
And so we are called to remember that human age of transition in the old Chaldea, looking back at an evolving world, looking deep into the essence, to recall how what once gave us succor in the dark unconscious became demon figures that inhabited the night.
And so Marduk Michael came from Sophia to reform these night figures into the stars above and the earth below, moving us away from the looming, weaving beings in the Tiamat, which lived in our inner world of sleep, so that we could live into everything that glistens from the stars, everything that calls for our service on the earth.
Yes, we had to let go of our atavistic clairvoyance to see things for ourselves. And now, dear friends, we must have the courage to speak to the stars and to listen, to learn that the winds of change are blowing ever and again.
In our time, many are blind to the spiritual worlds because intellectual knowledge, of which humanity is so proud, has become cold and hardened. We are now too much in the outer world, and the unseen spiritual world is disregarded or even despised, as much as the material world was in ancient times by those for whom the spiritual world was taken for granted.
So in addition to what modern science teaches, we have to cultivate what spiritual knowledge gives us. With the new Michael age, the time has come when out of our own heart thinking, we must give birth to wisdom consciously.
The demons are now in the outer world as well as within us and must be recognized. They appear as destruction and illness, as the three beasts of hatred, scorn, and doubt, sowing confusion and lies, and they work within our dead thinking and in our selfish feeling and willful greed.
We are now called to implement the new Michael mysteries, to build of ourselves through a new conscious artistic design, the being of Anthroposophia, in order to co-create the totality of a world where human actions heal through the threefold refounding of our soul forces in freedom, equality, and kinship. The time is at hand.
Right, that was amazing. I'm going to send you the lyrics to the song I'm going to sing. You can either follow along or look at it afterwards. Thank you for reading that. Michael, Michael, bring pedagogy in service of words that tell. Michael, Michael, inspire youth to seek in freedom. Michael, Michael, help us merge our selflessness with medicine. Oh, Michael, in our movement of the word, let us love the earth. Michael, Michael, in this social karmic trust, let us love not lost. Michael, Michael, through our harvest let us be bearers of the Spirit seeds. Michael, Michael, let our body, soul, and spirits be
in the light of Christ's evolution. Michael, Michael.
This comes from the book of Proverbs. Wisdom has built her house. She has carved her 7 pillars. She has prepared a great banquet, mixed the wines and set the table. She has set her voice to invite everyone to come. She calls out from the heights overlooking the city, "Come in with me," she urges the simple. And even to those who lack good judgment, she says, "Come, eat my food and drink the wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways behind and begin to live. Learn to use good judgment." Anyone who rebukes a mocker will get an insult in return. Anyone who corrects the wicked will get hurt. So don't bother correcting mockers. They will only hate you. But correct the wise, and they will love you. Instruct the wise, and they will be even wiser. Teach the righteous, and they will learn even more. And so now, dear friends, from that inspiring quote, we have asked our 7 pillars, 7 members from the various sections of the School of Spiritual Science, to stand as these 7 pillars and to share a little bit from their experience of how courage was born of wisdom for them, leading to their work in the world. So we're just going to start off with Michael Holdridge, speaking from the pedagogical section. Michael?
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to speak a bit about, I'm putting a timer on here because I have no idea. All right, go. How I came to this wisdom that gave me the courage to become a teacher. So I'm a product of the 1960s. I was part of that student revolution in student government. And also, I must say, I was part of what we now call the hippie movement as well. The recognition that consciousness has to change, that there are very different possibilities for experiencing the world and other dimensions of consciousness. That was a very, very real thing for me in those days, and my friends as well. But at the same time, I experienced how it was always a matter of, the idea was to give up one's thinking, actually, that thinking was, the view was that thinking was in one's way in order to become united with the spiritual worlds and so on. A rather Eastern, if you will, that's too big a generalization, orientation. So I was living in that and the need for social change. And at the same time, I was looking at education, which had always been the most unexciting thing for me. I mean, teacher, the last thing I ever wanted to be was a teacher, because I had found school actually boring and unstimulating. The social life was great, but that was about it. So I decided to explore in the teacher corps, and joined that for a while and learned lots of interesting things, and became a team teacher in a classroom or in a school building without walls, real experimental education in the late 60s, early 70s, and realized again, we don't know what we're doing. We're just out there. It's all the best. So I quit, hitchhiked back home from Louisville to Boulder, Colorado. And the next day I meet my friend, Jeff Martin. And Jeff Martin starts to tell me about Rudolf Steiner. And I realized very soon, I began to read, and within about a week and a half, I realized, my God, everything that I've done up until now, all of this searching and striving, had prepared me to recognize that this anthroposophy really is a path into the spiritual world that doesn't deny speaking, but really enlivens, and that you could say speaking is the portal through which we can rise into spiritual experience and spiritual clarity, spiritual freedom, and be able to work in the world as in an individuality rather than just merging ourselves with the greater cosmos. And so I went to Emerson College and began to study anthropology. Well, the first year I read 50 books on my own at home, and then I went to Emerson College for lecture cycles and studying anthroposophy with other people, very exciting. At Christmas, I go to Paris, walking around there in Paris one night, and for some reason I was alone that night, and I began to ask myself, what am I going to do with my life and when I get back to the States and so on? And it suddenly hit me, the most obvious thing to become was a teacher. And I must say, it hit me in the gut. You know, I thought, oh my God, to become a teacher, that's the last thing, you know, based on my experiences that I would want to become. But of course, I knew now I had the context, the wisdom of anthroposophy behind me. And so when I returned to Emerson, I began to look at the pedagogical side of anthroposophy more deeply, and began to see what, of course, the rest of my life has shown me again and again, this amazing development of the human being. That the wisdom of anthroposophy shows us the wisdom of human development. That these amazing, I like to call them the squirts, the little guys, yeah, these little kids who are really out there in the periphery. I mean, they are out in the periphery with their consciousness, the way they absorb a language and absorb the gestures of the people around them, and on and on and on. It's amazing, the gifts that they have, yeah, in the periphery. And how we see them, they're running around, of course, their limbs are so highly active, and then eventually they reach that point where they come into school. And I always have this picture that they see them sitting down in a chair, and they've got a teacher in front of them, and their heart is beating, and they're hearing stories like we just took in ourselves, these stories about of humanity in the cosmos, and how they are so given over in love and reverence for their teacher, for the wisdom of the world. And then when they're near puberty, all of a sudden, I'd say this eurythmy gesture, suddenly there's a separation and there's a question, and they begin to see that the world is far from perfect, even those adults around them, and they begin to question, how could the world be? Idealism awakens. They form ideals that they want to change this world. And so when I began to have this picture, and I could see, of course, how in this age group, this is exactly what I'd lived through when I was meeting anthroposophy, that there's a huge task here to help these young people, if one can, to find nourishment, that we become the sunlight for them now. Just as the sun shines upon plants and lets these unique seeds unfold, that we become the sunlight for them if we can, and that this is a hugely, hugely significant task and opportunity and gift in order to help wisdom shine upon young people and let them find their own wisdom themselves. And that gave me the courage, this picture, to take on this occupation that it was on the last of my list. And I must say, I feel like I'm one of the luckiest people on earth to have been able to work this way with young people these many, many decades now. And one last observation, when I met this anthroposophy through Jeff Martin, it was 50 years ago, I think this week. It was the last part of September 1970. So 50 years ago began this journey. That's it. I'll unmute myself, or mute myself.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. Beautiful, very inspiring. Okay, well now let's hear from the youth section. Stephan?
Hi all. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Welcome.
Well, I just want to acknowledge, after hearing Michael's such a nice story there, I think I've completely changed what I wanted to say. I also have such such a beautiful pastimes at Emerson College, and I guess I can start just before that. I grew up in a somewhat poor household in the South in Florida, and You know, I think my whole life as a young adult, as a young man, a child, a young man, and a young adult was characterized by this feeling of the kind of poverty that we experience in the South, the kind of isolation that so many young people are experiencing today. And through that context, I learned very strongly that if I wanted to get ahead in the world, and if I wanted to take care of myself, and if I wanted to have a family someday, that I needed to make money, that this was going to be the path to my upliftment. And even in the sense of spirit worlds and religion, I was deeply involved in a Vedic community in my early 20s, and even there, it was seen that if one could make enough money, and if one could support the temple, if they could support their family, that they were really doing well, and God would love them, and their communities would love them, and they would be uplifted. And so one day, after about maybe 5 years of working incredibly intensively, I think I had been working maybe 60 hours a week. I owned three CrossFit gyms and also a small like maintenance janitorial service. And I just found that there was nothing in my life that brought me enthusiasm, a real enthusiasm, and except for telling stories. And so I was telling a story one day from the Bhagavad Gita. It's a sort of the Sanatana Dharma Bible, if you will. And one of my friends reflected to me, you know, I think you love to tell stories. You're always telling stories, whether it's about the forest you grew up in Florida, or whether it's the Bhagavad Gita or some other story. You love telling stories. And so that night I went home and I typed into my computer, you know, is there any storytelling programs? And the only place that came up in the whole of the internet was Emerson College. And so I read through the page for the 3-month-long storytelling program, and I was like, there's something strange about this. I don't know what it is, but there's something, like, I don't quite get it yet, but I knew in that moment. It was like a flash. I had to go to this place. I had never been out of the country. Also growing up in a kind of a poor household, I never really thought I would leave the country. That was a real block in my inner world. And so sure enough, just to make a long story short, within 8 months, I was 28 years old. I was in fact walking up this beautiful oak-lined road to Emerson College, and I met Rudolf Steiner. I thought, like, what is this wizard hill? Like, I don't really know quite what this is, but I found the library and I started reading books there. And fast forward a little bit, almost 2 years later, now I'm living in upstate New York in the Hawthorne Valley community and studying Goethean science and so many things. And my work in the youth section is really characterized by this feeling, and this is where the wisdom comes in. I think it's related to my biography, in that Rudolf Steiner offers that, what is the youth section? What is the youth section? And I think I've heard a lot of questions like, what is this? And even the people in the youth section oftentimes are like, what are we? What are we doing here? And he offers us this vision that the youth section is a place where any young people have made a total commitment that they will stick together, that they'll love each other, they'll love each other's questions, they'll speak from deep within themselves, and they'll listen to each other. And that no matter what happens, we are going to stick together, and we're going to keep asking our questions, and we're going to get through whatever the zeitgeist is, whatever the spirit of the times is. It will enter into the container of our gatherings, and we'll face it together. And oftentimes that can be quite difficult. Recently, we had a series of gatherings that happened, you know, during this pandemic times, and it was a real question whether or not it would come through. And we decided early on, no matter what, we are totally committed that the youth will come together in the spirit of anthroposophy. And so I actually lost track of time a little bit. I'm probably over, but in that spirit, I want to offer a lot of gratitude to this community in the Midwest, and Hazel, Elderberries, and all of these elders who made it possible for us to come together this summer and experience the spirit of the times. And one last thing I just want to share is a mantra that we work with during all of our meetings. Sorry for going over, I'm sure, but I'll just share that now. The deeds enacted here on earth in love, friendship, and the intimate understanding of one another are building stones of temples being erected in the spiritual world. For those who recognize this fact, it is an uplifting feeling to know that the ties which bind soul to soul are the basis for eternal being. So thank you all, and I just want to offer from the youth section our work of creating intimate relationships and being committed to each other.
Thank
Beautiful.
you, Stephan.
Yeah, just
Beautiful.
very inspiring.
Beautiful.
Thank
And
you.
perfect on time.
Yep. Well, good. So now we're going to turn to the doctors, Molly and Quentin from Ann Arbor, the Rudolf Steiner Health Center there, which is absolutely beautiful. Molly, Quentin, are you there? Here we are. Hi.
We're here.
Hi.
Welcome.
The host has spotlighted your video. That's great. Yeah. Well, somewhere along the line, Rudolf Steiner said he'd rather listen to anyone else lecturing than have to give a lecture himself. And I think all of us who are speaking tonight probably can appreciate that sentiment. Nevertheless, I thought for our part, Molly has some other things to talk about maybe in the smaller group. I would give some points during our, or my biography that seemed to come from a point of wisdom, maybe from an angel, maybe from my own angel, that then took courage to hear and act on. So there was an early visit to New Orleans. There's some friends from New Orleans here tonight that just came out of the blue. I wanted to go somewhere for a long weekend, so I went to New Orleans, and that just sort of rested for many years after that. A lot of times in our early life, things come up that then play a big role later in life. Some of you here will remember Richard Anderman. He had a strong connection to Chicago, but he also lived on the East Coast, born in Washington, D.C. area. He was my roommate in college and introduced me to anthroposophy, and I think has been on this path with us in the meantime. He died at age 30. But he introduced me, and I also read many books during the first year. After that, probably not 50, but was able to go to lectures by the famous, greatest anthroposophists left over from the early New York City era, and also go to festivals in Spring Valley and sort of absorb some of that. Then, so a point of time where I was more or less directed to go to the youth conference in Dornoch was in 1972 with Richard Anderman together. And we thought we should go, and our teacher at the time said, no, you know, that will cost a lot of money. You'll get behind in your reading. There won't be anybody to tell you what's going on. And so Richard and I looked at each other and said, guess what, we're going. So we went. And that was a very important point in our biography. We both met many people there. There are, I think, 1,200, mostly young people, but also older teachers who played a great role in our life afterwards. And then back in the United States, I had a choice to make. And this was a moment of courage where I could either go back to school. I had dropped out of school in 1970. Most people dropped out of school in 1970. I could go back to school, I could go back to work, or I could go back to Schloss Homborn in Germany, an anthroposophical community, and learn biodynamics. And that was what I did. And that was very important for later life, knowing something about the plants and growth, and sort of a crash course in Waldorf education while I was there. We were not Waldorf students. So that was an important point. And then a second point that happened in Europe was going to Camp Hill in Holland. And an important episode happened there when I was about to leave. I was a co-worker, and I hadn't really decided what to do, but I thought medicine would be a good idea because I had to give the medicines to the villagers. And a young man, probably in his teens, asked me, what are you going to do when you go back to America? And so for the first time I answered, I'm going to study medicine. And he cried, and he was so happy for me. And I kept that image with me for years till I actually was able to study medicine. And then I met my wife, and I had a partner in crime. That was an important aspect, that I had someone to do this with. And Molly went to the Lucas Clinic and saw it at one point and said, we need one of these in the United States. And that's what led to, that whole idea led to the Rudolf Steiner Health Center. So biographically, there were many points where I had to listen carefully to what was being told to me and then to act. And so I think that many of us have those experiences, and that's worthwhile to listen to. Yeah, so 5 minutes. Thank you.
Beautiful, thank you. And then you said, Molly, you're gonna speak maybe a little bit in the breakout groups that we're gonna do later? Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you, so inspiring. And if anybody gets a chance to come out to your clinic out there in Ann Arbor, it's just a sanctuary, just a beautiful place. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up we have our dear eurythmist, Barbara Richardson. Of course, she could speak about pedagogy as well, but I think, well, we'll see what she's got to say.
Yeah.
Barbara, how are you?
Just
welcome.
Wait. Hi. Oh dear, Q, what's that? Yikes, can you hear me? What's going on?
No, you're fine, we see you.
Okay, good, good, okay.
You're good.
Well, thank you, Hazel. It's a joy to see all my friends. I can't see everybody, but I know you're there, some of you. Michael will be very surprised. He did a little eurythmy. Well, to prepare for this talk, I read the third scientific lecture course on astronomy, lecture 18. Because when I went to the clinic in Ann Arbor, they had a talk from the natural science section, and it was about comets. And I've been living with this picture, this imagination of the comet ever since then. Today, I finally printed out the lecture 17 or 18 and read it. And, but a comet is, it comes into being at every moment, and it also melts away, losing the old. And it's a phenomenon of light. And I thought, that's a lot like eurythmy. When you do eurythmy, you feel like you're doing that. You're coming into being every single second that you're doing it. And you feel different afterwards. And yeah, so I read that Steiner says, if you have a piece of salt in your hand, it's like a planet. If you have a rose in your hand, you know it's related to the entire peripheral world around it. So what you said, Lisa, we hold the middle and reach for the periphery. So you stand on the earth as an awake human being, and that's hard for people to understand what eurythmy is. You do it and you forget about it. So I just recently went to a little workshop. I did 30 minutes of eurythmy with the people. And there were many other things throughout the day. It was the Anthroposophical Medical, Anthroposophical Health Association, the new name for the thing. And we did all these things all day. Then 2 or 3 days later, we had a review. Not one person remembered that we did eurythmy. So that's just kind of, we do it and then shoot. I don't have that memory of eating enchiladas. I don't have that memory of watching Mikhail on the video. It's so intangible. So that's kind of the task of a eurythmist. So I found eurythmy in Ann Arbor through Dr. Kotz organizing. Renata Krauss and Tony Taps took me there, and Art Zients and Steve Usher were there, and Burley Channer was there, who's here tonight. I had a very strong experience after that. And I think this gave me the self-confidence and courage to, I hope respectfully, shake off my past education, religion, upbringing. So I still love my family, but I wasn't going to go that same way. So, and then it led me to, well, because my past wasn't giving me the answers that I needed to life. So that led me to the Waldorf Institute in Detroit, and Werner Glass really inspired us to study more art before we became teachers. He also importantly introduced us to the Anthroposophical Society. And he said, if you join the society, you will be able to help Rudolf Steiner in his destiny. And I was so grateful for Steiner bringing all that we had studied in teacher training. And I wanted to thank him, and I just walked out of there going, absolutely, I can help Rudolf Steiner by doing this, I'm in. So most of you know, that's kind of my life. That's a big part of my life. After my years in Detroit and Chicago, I thought city kids need Eurythmy. So I better take it up to make sure wherever I go, there will be Eurythmy. And on the way to the London School of Eurythmy, I went to a conference in Dornoch, and we saw Eurythmy symphonies every single night with full orchestras and 25 or 30 eurythmists on stage. It was unbelievable. And when I got back, well, then I did my kind of trial by fire, water and air in Eurythmy training for 5 years. And when I came back to Chicago, I'm speeding up because I'm running over. When I came back to Chicago, I realized we had to do everything. We had to perform, we had to teach, we had to do therapeutic eurythmy. And so I did it all. And the people around me in Chicago, at one point, there were 950 people doing eurythmy on a regular basis in Chicago every week, taught by 12 different eurythmists. The people developed the eyes to see eurythmy, which I encounter as imagination. They had the ears to hear speech formation, and we developed inspiration, so we knew how to teach. And then they developed the intuition, the will to practice artistically and therapeutically on their own and take it up on their own. So that's how the work grew. And now I'm trying to work with a group of people to start a therapeuticum in Freeport. We have a studio, Eurythmy studio. But what gave me the courage through all the years to develop eurythmy in Chicago and now in Maine is the encouragement of my friends. Ron, Trauda, Judith, Rosemary and Magda, Burley, Barbara Biddles, Brian, Susan and Susan, Andrea and Ross, Rick and Alice. All of my colleagues in the Midwest Eurythmy group, Arcturus, Chicago Waldorf School, the little children like Lucian that I taught, Esperanza, and the branch members in Chicago. Thank you.
Wow. And the academy goes to?
I know. But I had to mention my friends.
No, that's a lovely gesture, you know, that we can all work together like that. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow, here we go. I'm bubbling over here. And Douglas Wylie, we're going to call him in to talk a little bit about his work with the social science section. Doug, are you with us?
Thank you, Hazel. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes, can you hear me? Okay, great. Okay, thanks so much. And for the invitation, I'm so pleased to be able to do this, although it's a bit daunting, I think, to do this. But anyways, and I think everything that's been said so far really speaks to why I'm here and what has brought me to the social sciences section. Thank you so much. The first half of my life, I was raised as a material scientist. My father was a physics teacher, and I didn't come to anthroposophy until I was 33. And so then discovering Waldorf to start with, and my two lovely children went to Waldorf in near Toronto, Canada. I'm in California right now. And after a long study of taking it up and just becoming totally amazed by, so much of everything that at the Anthroposophical Society, and everything that Rudolf Steiner brought was just incredible for me. It was like coming home. So after many years, I asked the question, how do we pay for Waldorf? This is, you know, as parent and tuition and all of this, there must be a better way to pay for Waldorf, which right away, within a week, I met Tamara Slayton, and she said, well, Steiner, he had these great ideas on how we could pay for Waldorf. And I went, well, where is it? Let's do this. And she said, well, it doesn't really live so much in the world. And so then I took up an immediate study of Steiner's threefolding and economics and social science. And I joined the school after 10 years, a member of the society, member of the Michael School, and then started a garden, a Carville community garden at the Toronto Waldorf School with my friend Manfred Palmer as an experiment. Let's just do this economics. And my research and challenge was to bring home what I was reading and thinking was so great from the 1922 economics lectures. And so that was 10 years of biodynamic gardening. I was a member of the board of the BioDynamic Society in Ontario at the time, and then took up this wonderful gardening with, it was a farming really of collective farming, and really taking Steiner's indications, and really every time there was a social problem in the garden, if we get up to about 65 members, I would go back to the economic lectures and sorted out all of the way we could organize ourselves. Any profit would go to the school. We were lending money, we would buy tractors, and we had just a marvelous garden. That then led to a much bigger question, because then I realized that what we were doing in the garden really could be done on a world scale. There's no question in my mind. Now and then, and I just asked the bigger question, why is this not living in the world? The world is needing this, the children need this. All of the calamities we have in the world, many of them come from the social, the economic. I joined the economics conference, and then that brought me into the social sciences section. So the courage of starting the garden, and then the courage of then being asked to be the treasurer of the society in Canada. And I wasn't an accountant, I'm an engineer. I jumped in and started to learn about accounting and charities and just the whole society, and working with the social arts. And it was just an amazing stepping stone for me to do that. As I mentioned, I'm an engineer. I work in the industrial economy. I work for a big materials manufacturer, carbon fiber. So I'm right in the world of economics. And it brings me to a question: if this social organism that Steiner called, this threefold social organism, our spirit within our social organism, how do we really transform it? Steiner was clear on all the things that were false in it, the economics and the way we're so antisocial. We have to have the individual. The social science section is common to all of us. We're all social beings, and we're creating a social organism, which I've come to realize through my study is really the etheric Christ. And we have to really pay attention to our divine nature within this. This McMullen school really brings us to something that's really wonderful. And I have lots of hope, and the Anthroposophical Society has really done that for me. We're in this together, and we have to do something to find our way forward through all the calamities that we're living with today. So I do have this wonderful knowledge that we're going to work together. I do count on everybody else. That's the way I work through my life, and we're going to do this together. So that's what brought me to the social sciences section, and my real big task now is to transform what I'm doing at work in large corporations. So that's my daunting task, and thank you again.
Thank you, Douglas. Yes, I'm glad to know that somebody like you is out there in the world, and that we can count on you as a team member. So yeah, let's get this work done. Thank you. Good. All right, we're gonna turn it over to Rand Carter. He's usually from Florida, but he's up in upstate New York right now, and he's going to talk about some biodynamic agriculture.
All right, a little technical problem right here.
Well, we're going to see if Alberto can bring up your slides if you want to do that.
Rand, you've also muted yourself, or somebody's muted you.
How about that? Is that better?
That's better. Very good.
Okay, I must have tapped something. So yeah, you got Rand Carter. I've lived in Florida since 1960. Was the only kid that stayed at home, and ended up taking care of my mother till she passed on. Was rather lost, and so I started my search for something to do some traveling, which I enjoyed immensely. And so this was in the spring of 2015, got my truck and drove due west with the idea of finding out about biodynamics. There was virtually nothing on the internet about biodynamics. You couldn't find anything. So it's come a long way in 5-6 years. 7 years. Anyway, I ended up spending most of my time on the West Coast, taking classes on biodynamics and jumping into farms and seeing what I had to offer. I'd have to say at this point that it really all came together, and I actually felt it at the Live Power Farm in Covelo, California. I think it was the birth and the cement that took me into deciding to stick with and really search out biodynamics and farming. All of my brothers and sisters were growing food, but Florida offers unique challenges. And so biodynamics in 5 minutes. It's the first PowerPoint I've ever put together, so I couldn't possibly give you the full story. So I'm going to hopefully find out that I can make PowerPoint happen, but my passion, of course, is composting and gardening. So Michaelmas's color red represents courage. The dragon represents our shadow part that we need to strive to tame. Once tamed, we can then move forward with the new physical and spiritual freedoms. This next Tuesday, Michaelmas, consider hosting a potluck. Invite the elementals by feeding them Hugo Herbe's Harmonizing Preparation number 9. You'll find the recipe at the end of this slideshow. And living physically, spiritually, and anthroposophical biodynamics is challenging but highly rewarding and probably necessary. So in 1924, biodynamics head scientist Aaron Fried Pfeiffer asked Mr. Steiner, slide 2, please, I'm sorry. In spite of all these people's efforts, why is there so little evidence of spiritual experience? Why, most of all, is the will for action so weak? Mr. Steiner's reply was, this is a problem of nutrition. A bridge can no longer be built from thinking to will and action. Food plants no longer contain the forces people need for this. This was 1924. Things have gone rather south since then. Slide 3, please. Doesn't this color the Dr. Zach's bush of the 7 trillion cells, hungry cells that we all share, called the microbiome, remind you of looking into the coals of a bonfire? I'm up in New York now, got to pick some apples. You don't get to do that in Florida. And we have big fires every evening, burning off the fallen firewood on the property. But anyway, I just love that graphic. Real food enters into the subtle body and the bulk of that food is eliminated. The plant life, its information, its knowledge, its memories, and its experiences are stored there. All this information is passed on to you. processed foods, fake sweets, CAFO, meat, which is concentrated animal feeding operations, a horrible thing, are not the places to find these essential spiritually nurturing properties. Slide 4, please. We've all heard about the problems of modern day farming. I don't need to bore you with all that. Do you see and hear nature yelling loudly, or are you caught up in the dilemma of today of isolation and your own individuality? Prince Charles said, we must re-embrace the sense of the sacred and work with nature in harmony. Nothing like working in your garden to connect with nature. I think Stephan would agree with that. Dr. Zach Bush takes it up a few notches. If we are unable to recover the microbiome of the planet, we are going to fail as a species. Already 50% of us suffer chronic diseases. In 2016, 45% of the farmland was destroyed. It's something like 3 acres per minute is lost. And all of society, as Mr. Steiner will say, will be continue to be impacted by this. Slide 5. I hope you all take the opportunity to read Steiner's Cosmic Workings in Earth and Man. Lecture 3 on nutrition is just lovely. Steiner tells us all this talk about spirituality streaming down from the universe is so much twaddle. The spiritual is an active power in nature and must work in the earth's substance. If a man is not able to make proper use of his body and adjust to the conditions of earthly life, then it'll be very difficult for him to find his bearings after death. Slide 6. The fallacy of many religions is grasping spirit and bringing it into the material world. Most religions seem to despise material existence instead of understanding it. Over there is base materialism, which is the dregs of humanity. But over here is idealism, which is for the elect. I feel anthroposophy and biodynamics are harmonious and all-encompassing. Slide 7. Nutrition as a bridge and the courage to pursue it is the birth of wisdom. The lack of pursuit arises not from strength, but from weakness of soul. Slide 8. Modern man has neglected the elementals. Any acknowledgement you show towards the elementals will be of an utmost surprise to them. The preparations are challenging to make them. That's what allows the farm to exist as its own entity. Hugo Urbe's harmonizing prep number 9 is easy to make and a great choice for your kitchen. The prep not only feeds the elementals, but works to release the forces that enable a plant to bloom, sprout, grow, blossom, and pass their very essence onto you. So perhaps you are, that ends up your slideshow. Perhaps you're looking for more inspiration and direction. Consider joining the Merry Prepsters on Facebook. We coordinate global prep applications done every month, or better yet, and live the experience that I had at Live Power, take a couple weeks working vacation to a BD farm and live the farming life. Honor them and yourself with your support. Steiner emphasizes community, and this is a great way to meet other like-minded people and have an opportunity to do something special and magical. You need it, they need you, and the future of our life depends on it.
Thank you, Rand. Thank you so much. Yeah, I've been one of the Merry Prepsters now for a little bit of time, and it is a beautiful way of building community and spiritualizing the earth. So thank you for leading that and bringing us together for that work.
Thank you.
So now I believe we have Dorothy. Dorothy is here with us. Hey, Dorothy, welcome, welcome.
Oh, the challenges of the media. Anyway, I'm here on my phone. My computer is not happy with me, or you're not happy with me. Anyway, but I have a whole different kind of perspective. Threefolding is just nothing to do in 5 minutes. So I'm doing a little bit different, but a personal experience that I've been meditating on money, which is key to threefolding. And actually, I could consider it a gift of the spiritual world. I have some insight that I want to share with you people. And that is, money appeared to me as a being, and really a being of love and a being of service. It was a gift of the gods to all of us here on earth, and indirectly to the earth. And money wants to serve humans, and it's a being not limited in space or in time, or not stuck within skin or a place. It's a being that we can relate to, but also that the being can relate to us. And so there's recognition that's possible, there's perception that's possible, and there's communication that's possible that can happen with this being of money, this being of love and service. Now, money wants to move. I mean, it doesn't want to sit around. It wants to flow ever onward. And this being does not want to be captured in abstract thinking, nor does it want to be thingified as a coin or as land. But when money is captured as a thing or reduced to abstraction, money does then serve evil. And we know about that. And it leads to egotism, it leads to fear, it leads to greed. So please recognize money as a being of love and service. Now, I'm not talking about really advanced clairvoyance. I'm asking each of us to hold that deep wisdom that comes when we really have a relationship, when we really listen to money. Hold it conscious, and hold the love and the wisdom in our relationship with money. And with this wisdom then comes the courage to live with money and work with money, to serve each other and to serve our earth. And money is the life force of the economic realm. And when the economic realm is healthy, there's a surplus of money, meaning a surplus of love. And then this surplus money, surplus love can flow into the civic realm and give the needed resources. And then money can flow into the spirit realm, also called sometimes the cultural realm, and give needed resources there to nourish the sources of spiritual wisdom that we all seek through our own individual spiritual work. And then the spiritual wisdom flows back into the economic realm to nourish the daily life of each of us. So perceive money as a love-serving being, and relate to money as a love-serving being, and work with money as a love-serving being, awake and conscious and so grateful. And then courage will come to each of us to do what is right with money. And this is in some ways very simple, but for me it was very profound and really transformative in my life. So I share it with you, and I thank you. And I thank all those who went before me. It was really lovely to hear everything everybody had to say.
Thank you so much. That's a perfect ending. So we have our homework, folks. We have an interesting image to take with us. Thank you, Dorothy. That's just really profound. So folks, we are, running obviously a little late. So I think we're gonna take ourselves into to meet each other. We're gonna go into the breakout groups, and we'll take 15 minutes there. And so yeah, we can discuss, what some of our friends, the pillars, gave us. We can look at some of their information, or we can really explore a little bit from our biography. Weren't you inspired? And did it make you think about, how wisdom came to give you the courage that you needed to do your work in the world? So we're going to have 4 people in each breakout group. And so you'll, a couple minutes to get to know each other, and then 3 minutes each, more or less, to speak on this. And then we'll come back together as a big group and, you know, we can popcorn some questions and stuff. And we may just end it with that. And we may just end it with Lucian's song. We'll have to see how we feel. So what do you think there, Alberto?
We're going to start the breakout rooms right now in a minute. Just remember to unmute yourselves, and you can also start sharing video so that you can see each other who will be in your karmic room. It will be 3 or 4 participants per room. There we go. 15 minutes.
Oh my. No. Breakout.
Join breakout.
Hello, Jody. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi. Were you not taken to a breakout room, or did you get out of a room?
I just never entered.
Okay. Are you fine staying quiet for a little bit?
Yes.
Okay, good. Otherwise, I can put you in a room.
No, I'm fine. Thank you, Alberto.
Sure. Thank you.
Hi, Lindeberg.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Travis.
Marianne.
As I see people that I'm seeing that I didn't see before because you were all, you know, shrunken somewhere else. Oh, and Pam Fenner. Got your books. This is so good.
So great to see everybody.
So do we want to have, anybody want to share what they talked about in their breakout group, or, you know, take a few minutes to just be together here?
Hey, so can you, can we view the whole group?
Yeah.
Rather than your slide?
There
Even
we
though I
go.
like looking at your slide.
That's it.
There we go. Thank you.
This was the first time I was in a breakout group ever. And I think it's great that one can do that. It was really nice to get two people to know a little better.
I'm amazed at this technology. I mean, one of our group was from the Philippines, and I think she must be the furthest away. But to be able to participate in something here in Massachusetts that's happening or hosting from Chicago, or the general meeting of the Anthroposophical Society or one of their workshops is such a benefit, at least for me, to be able to join an evening like this. Particularly Michaelmas.
I would like to know how you decide to put three people, the karmic thing, that you end up with 3 people randomly. How do you make it? It's funny. I mean, how do you, just tell me.
We call them random groups because it's just technology that assigns people to the different groups, but you never know who will be there, you know?
Yeah.
So do we thank the
karma.
Could I just like to echo something that someone said in my group about feeling a sense of this new anthroposophical generation as this like upsurge that's really taking shape. And I feel like for older anthroposophists and younger anthroposophists, it's really beautiful to have this striving for integration, because then it almost, it connects sort of a karmic renewal that it's a very alchemical relationship that happens when the younger generation kind of merges with the older generation, and then it kind of filters back throughout the incarnations. So I definitely feel in my own experience of the youth section that there's this like incredible, vivid anthroposophical striving. And then when I meet the elders, it feels like there's so much meaning and shape, like a home. So I would just encourage like continuous cross-pollination in that way, because it's endlessly anthroposophical in multiple levels.
Thank you, Lucian. From an oldster to a youngster, second grader.
Yeah, me too. Hi, Lucian. Thanks.
I wanted to note that someone in our group was asking about something related to the crossing of the threshold of death. And I realized that it's not really discussed in one of the pillars, and yet this connection of spirit and beingness on this side and on that side are so much a part of each of the pillars. And so we got to really have that conversation for a moment, and it was very meaningful for me.
Beautiful.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, Linda, because I feel like that relationship to the dead, as well as the study of karma, are some of those things that are in this general section, if you will, that really weave through the whole of the work of Rudolf Steiner. And we're all called to kind of be awake to those opportunities to connect through karma and the working with the dead. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because you're right, it's not in a pillar, right?
Right.
And of course, just so those of you who are aware, there are more than 7 sections of the School for Spiritual Science. We chose 7. We recognize and honor the fact there are others. Just so you know.
I loved Michael's comment about cross-pollination between the elders and the youngsters. That's delightful. Something very interesting in the biodynamic world is we've lost about 5 or 6 of our elder biodynamic teachers has crossed over the threshold. So there's something going on the other side that needs a bunch of biodynamic agriculture folks over there for some reason.
Hello. Hello. Again. Hi.
Hello. The same thing is happening in the world of the lyre players. Just within the last few months, they've lost 2 major founding players of the Lyre Association of North America. Carrie Lee just passed, and Hannah Seidenberg back in eastern Pennsylvania and upstate New York. So we're thinking of them very much these days.
Beautiful lyre. Yes. Lovely.
I appreciated Michael talking about, or each of them, how they happened to go into the fields that they did. And Michael, where the last thing you wanted to be was a teacher. And I thought, I went into teaching and then dropped out. And then because of Rene Carrito, who kept talking about Voce, this calling, I went back, and it's actually 30 years ago this month, I enrolled at the 3-year San Francisco teacher training program. And then in the end, I didn't go into teaching. I went into administration and now publishing, which is a different kind of education and teaching. But calling comes in various ways, and I'm very grateful for people like Renee and some of the people that others have mentioned here tonight.
Well, in our breakout group, I spoke about a moment in my life where I gained a lot of courage through working with the soil, and planting a garden gave me a renewal that I hadn't been able to find, mining all the other resources that I had in my life. But when I planted a garden, this upsurge of hope came back into my life in a way that was easy and joyful and spring-like, and it was really wonderful. And so I connect very directly, to the biodynamic movement. My biodynamic teacher was Peter Dukic. And also, what else? Connecting to this idea of right orientation, right relationship with the love being of money. And it had been such a scary thing. And because of this joyfulness I found re-emerging in myself, I was able to create some beautiful paintings that I sold, which you know, fattened my pocketbook, and gave me a sense of security and, you know, greased the wheels, as it were. So just connecting again to those themes that were mentioned here in the pillars.
Thank you. Beautiful to see how it affects us all when we share like that. Great.
Shall we travel forward with our program here?
So that's a question. Do we want to continue with our closing, or do we want to just skip to the end? What do y'all think? We have 55 stalwart people that stayed with us, and you know, we were supposed to end at 8:30. So and we're usually very prompt. So what does CRC think? What should we do? What does everybody want?
We have about a 5-minute little closing and then our song with Lucienne. So,
okay.
Shall we go for it?
All right, so everyone please put yourself on mute again, and we'll finish the program.
Michael, whose name is a question, for it means who is like God, is, in our time, the countenance of Christ, and is working with the Sophia, Greek for wisdom, to become the countenance for human beings.
This goal will be attained when the sunlight of divine thought finds direct entry into human souls, when humanity is no longer a shadow darkened by head thinking alone. We are all participants in this new Sophia-inspired Michaelic age.
Michael works with the Sophia, first by spiritualizing our thinking forces into free, visionary heart thinking, a process in which feeling and will are also transformed. And secondly, by spiritualizing our view of nature.
The gnosis of the Sophia, called by Goethe the eternal feminine, reveals a divine being of the stars, a pleroma holding the qualities of high-ranking hierarchies.
She unites the highest worlds from which humanity originated with the individual human being, inspiring initiation into mysteries old and new, the source and sum total of all higher wisdom predestined for humanity.
As the divine ideal of the human spirit, she is at the same time the archetype of the human soul, the cosmic mother of humanity, sister of the Christ, co-worker with Michael.
The starry or sun relationship shows her as in the imagination of the apocalypse, the form of the woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. The attacks of the dragon are aimed at her and the child. Michael intervenes. The being, known to us as Anthroposophia, incarnates in our developing human thinking.
Shortly before the Christmas conference, Steiner tells us, quote, when we more and more through living anthroposophical contemplation get to experiencing anthroposophy with the heart, then it will really be for us as if living beings enter our soul. Then it appears more and more that anthroposophy herself is a living being. And we become aware that something through anthroposophy knocks at the door of our hearts and says, let me in, because I am you yourself. I am your true human being, end quote.
In Rudolf Steiner's first leading thought, he points to the reality of this. The former divine Sophia becomes Anthroposophia by joining herself with the development of human thinking, entering more and more into the hearts of humankind.
Wow, okay. That story was like so amazing. I feel just joy like emanating from me. I just want to say one thing before I close this song. Even just in this short time being together, I feel that now I can sing to you, from you. I don't have to just have to sing in front of you, because there's already been this like community created through the living experience of ourselves with each other. So this song, The Time Has Come. I just put in the lyrics in the chat. The time has...
Lucian singing.
What? What?
I think we were just needing everybody to mute.
Okay. I'll start again. Now the time has come. The time has come to speak the giving of love. The time has come to see the giving light of freedom. So open the door in wisdom and breathe love in goodness.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you. Yes, I think we have tamed those cyber demons. We've got them on our side now, haven't we? So yeah, so let's let's just thank everybody. Let's thank our 7 pillars, Michael Holdridge and Stephan Ambrose, Drs. Wylie and Quentin McMullen, and Barbara Richardson, Douglas Wylie, Rand Carter, Dorothy Hinkle-Uhlig. Thank you so much. You've really touched us here, and we're really going to live into everything, these gifts that you've given us. And yeah, we are building the House of Wisdom, all of us. We're all part of it. And we need each other to shore up this house and to make it strong. So we've got work to do. So let us have the courage and let us have the wisdom to work with Michael and all these spiritual beings and with each other. So yeah, anybody wants to say good night, this is the time.
Thank you, Lucian and everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And good night.
Thank you.
Happy
Good night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hazel.
Bye, Alberta.
Thank you.
Happy Michaelmas, everybody.
Thank you. Love you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Till next time. Bye-bye.
Many blessings. Happy
So
Michaelmas.
inspiring.
Yeah, Lucian will be with us again on Saturday when we do another one here in Chicago, so tune in.
Bye, guys.